Biden administration is facing heat from pro-Palestinian activists after reporting indicates Israel will face zero consequences from the White House if it attacks Rafah in southern Gaza. Politico reports that 3 U.S. officials granted anonymity to detail internal discussions told the outlet that no reprimand plans are in the works, meaning Israeli forces could enter the city and harm civilians without facing any consequences from the U.S. More than half of the enclave's 2.3 million population has fled to Rafah, putting them in clear danger whenever a ground operation moves forward and Israel passes the bombing phase. White House spokesman John Kirby seemed to confirm this during a press conference yesterday. Let's take a look.
I want to make it clear here. This is a sovereign nation. They plan their military operations and they conduct their military operations and they make the choices. It's not like we give them a homework assignment and they have to then turn in their plan to us for grading. We have said that from our perspective, as a friend of Israel and as a supporter of their efforts to defend themselves, we would expect that any plan for going into Rafah would properly account for the now more than 1 million civilians that are seeking refuge down there.
Biden is facing some pushback in his own party. Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland gave a speech on the floor of the Senate to urge the president to, quote, hold the Netanyahu government accountable and get critical humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Though the community notes under the video noted following the speech, Van Hollen still voted to defund UNRWA and continue military funding to Israel.
The Biden administration's reluctance to leverage aid to Israel comes as the country appears to be aggressively blocking Gaza from maintaining a stable food supply. Axios reports that Israeli finance minister is blocking a U.S.-funded flour shipment to Gaza because its recipient is UNRWA. U.S. officials said this is a violation of a commitment Netanyahu personally made to President Biden several weeks ago. And another reason the U.S. leader is frustrated with the Israeli prime minister, who he apparently privately called an a-hole several times. With this John Kirby statement, saying it's not a homework assignment, we're not grading them, they can do what they want. Justin Amash, a former member of Congress who's from the Libertarian Party, responded saying, well, then Israel can plan and conduct their military operations without our money and assistance. Like, you can't have it both ways. Yeah. You're saying they don't have to listen to us, but well, then why do we have to fund them? Which is obviously is kind of the broader libertarian point and my point in all of this. Not so much about telling them what to do, but if we can't tell them what to do, why? If they're clearly not interested. Or Netanyahu is not interested in listening to he doesn't care what Biden thinks about his military plans. He doesn't, which makes Biden look weak and makes us look kind of like suckers. Like we're supplying this whole effort and it's not being done. Our interests are not being considered, even though it's our money. They don't care. Netanyahu, again, doesn't care.
I think the analogy, given the kind of protectorate status that the U.S. has over Israel diplomatically and financially, would be to say your kid isn't doing their homework and you as a parent are disclaiming any responsibility for it, or your kid's been truant and you're saying, well, it's not my fault. I'm not their legs. I can't walk them to school. They're autonomous. They get to decide what they want to do. Well, you're funding the kid. You're the one that's driving the kid to school. You're the one that's overseeing their homework production. Like, you're the one that paid this tuition for them to go to this private school in this analogy, regardless. So this is the situation we're in. And the rhetoric that is being used by these spokespeople is really incredible. I wish we had included some of the reporters' questioning, because without the questioning, you don't have a really good sense of how evasive the answers are. The questions are really sharp, really clear. Journalists are asking things like, look, you've been telling us for months that you need Israel to follow humanitarian law and that you are getting assurances that they will. And then week after week after week, we see atrocities demonstrating that they, in fact, are not. At the same time, you're saying Israel cannot do a ground invasion in Rafah. We do not support a ground invasion in Rafah without taking care of civilian interests. They are saying we're going to do a ground invasion into Rafah. So how are you going to stop? When are we going to stop talking past each other where you say, well, they should be doing this. We only support it if they do that. Clear in the knowledge that they haven't been doing that, and they seem to have no plans to do what America is telling them to do. Where is the accountability here?
And it's important to remember for people that historically it was not like this, that there were strings attached to the aid we were giving to many countries, including Israel, going back to to the Reagan years and the Clinton years. There was you can find Republican officials who are now generally, full-throatedly supportive of Israel. Though there's some dissenting Republicans who are skeptical of continued funding. Same way on the Democratic side, honestly. Party broadly supportive, some, but increasingly some pushback of U.S. government officials saying, speaking out against, strongly speaking out against expansion into the West Bank and other things of that nature. Now it's like they're just not listening, but we're still funding it.
Yeah, and Biden, I think there was some pressure. Remember he put sanctions on 4 individual humans in the West Bank when hundreds of Palestinians have been killed by settler violence since this conflict started. Mind you, this is in the West Bank, not in Gaza. This is not a fight to hunt down Hamas. This is settler violence. Israelis who have been, in many cases, armed by the state, doing vigilante justice against the Palestinian population there. And that all that Biden has been able to muster so far is this cursory sanction of 4 individuals. Now, at the same time that you have Israeli government officials attending a settler conference explicitly talking about the prospect of settling Gaza within giant maps of Gaza with new Israeli city names attached to the locations of Palestinian cities and towns, and what is a clear indication of a plan to ethnically cleanse the area permanently and not allow people to resettle. There was a really amazing exchange between a reporter and Matt Miller, one of the other State Department spokespersons, where she asked an incredibly well-formulated question about accountability. And she said, okay, I hear what you're saying. Israel should do this. America wants Israel to do that. But realistically speaking, we have examples. We know what happened with the case of American Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, how there was no accountability for her death, how Israel lied about their role in her death, claimed that they did not kill her, then claimed that it was an accident, and then finally had to acknowledge what had happened. But there was never any relationship change between U.S. and Israel. There were no consequences for Israel. So how can we expect there to be anything different going forward? We see that there is no explanation, there's no justification provided for Israel doing things like destroying every single university in Gaza, for desecrating 16 cemeteries in Gaza. What will be the accountability? We don't have to project into the future to be asking questions about things that Israel should be accountable for today, that we're seeing with our own eyes. Moreover, and she didn't bring this part up, why is it that there is this incredible double standard where the mere accusation from Israel about UNRWA has resulted in us cutting funding along with a bunch of other peer nations that have decimated their funding supply based on just the allegation, when we see how much more evidence do we need? And of course, he prevaricated and he said we treat Israel the same way we treat every other country in the world, and we will get accountability, which of course is just plainly untrue on its face. And that's why I think you're seeing these numbers and polls of how few Americans actually support this ongoing siege.
And don't maybe trust Joe Biden to force his will on a country that is not acting in the interests that he says he wants them to act in. Yeah. We're just not. We want America to be taken seriously if we're going to be, especially if we're going to be giving them all of our money. More Rising right after this.